What if the most powerful thing you could do today, in a world screaming for your attention every second of every hour, is absolutely nothing? Not nothing as in lazy, not nothing as in giving up, nothing as in a deliberate, calculated, almost violent act of withdrawal. Because here is the hidden truth that nobody in the business of selling you things, selling you ideas, selling you a version of yourself wants you to discover. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is where all real power lives. And the people who figured this out, the ones who quietly built empires while the rest of the world was distracted by the noise they themselves manufactured, those people understood something so fundamental, so old, and so ruthlessly effective that has been kept just out of sight for decades. This is their story, and it is also yours if you are willing to stop long enough to hear it. Look around you right now. Not literally, just think about the last hour of your life. How many sounds competed for your brain? Your phone buzzed, a notification badge turned red. An app whispered that someone reacted to something you posted 3 days ago. The television in the background wasn't even something you chose to watch. It was just on. The way a faucet left running is just on, draining something you cannot see. Your email had a subject line designed by a team of psychologists to feel urgent. A podcast was playing while you drove because the idea of sitting in a car with only your own thoughts felt somehow wrong, somehow wasteful, somehow uncomfortable. That discomfort is not an accident. It was engineered. The average person in a modern city is exposed to somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 advertising messages every single day. That number is not a typo. 6,000 to 10,000. Each one of those messages was built by a team of people whose entire job is to interrupt the quiet inside your head and replace it with a want, a craving, a sense that what you currently have is not enough, that who you currently are is not enough, and that somewhere out there, for 3 easy payments of some carefully calculated price, the missing piece is waiting for you. The machine runs on your restlessness. The moment you find peace, the machine loses. And the machine does not intend to lose. But here is what the machine never anticipated. Or maybe it did anticipate it and simply hoped you would never figure it out. The oldest, most battle-tested strategy in the history of power, whether in war, in finance, in politics, or in the quiet corridors where real decisions get made, has always been the strategic use of silence, not as a weakness, not as an absence, but as a weapon sharp enough to cut through any amount of noise without making a single sound. To understand how this works, we have to go back, not to a boardroom, not to a trading floor. We have to go to a specific kind of room that most people have never sat in. The kind of room where the furniture is old, the light is low, and the person sitting across from you says almost nothing while you, for reasons you cannot explain, feel compelled to fill every second of quiet with words you had not planned to say. That room has existed in one form or another for centuries. And the person sitting in it, the one saying almost nothing, is almost always the one with the most to gain. Let us travel to the 1930s. The world was broken. Not metaphorically broken in the way people use that phrase today about minor inconveniences. Broken like a machine that has been dropped from a great height and is now just a collection of parts on the floor. The crash of 1929 had not just wiped out fortunes. It had wiped out the idea that the people running things knew what they were doing. Banks were closing. Farmers were watching their land get auctioned off for pennies. Families who had considered themselves solidly middle class were standing in lines that stretched around city blocks for a bowl of soup. And in the middle of all this noise, all this panic, all this desperate chatter about what had gone wrong and who was to blame and when it would end, a small number of men made fortunes so large they are still being felt today. They did not do it by being smarter. They did not do it by working harder. They did it by going quiet when everyone else was screaming. There is a man named Bernard Baruch. If you do not know that name, that is not surprising. He spent a significant portion of his life ensuring that most people did not know that name, at least not in any detail that would reveal exactly how his mind worked. Baruch was an advisor to presidents, multiple presidents, across multiple decades, across 2 world wars. He was what people in certain circles called a speculator, which is a word that sounds vaguely criminal and is meant to because the people who use it are usually the ones who wish they had thought of it first. Baruch had a habit that his contemporaries found strange and his enemies found maddening. When a room full of people were arguing, debating, raising their voices over the right course of action, Baruch would sit. He would listen. He would occasionally ask a single quiet question that somehow made everyone in the room stop talking. And then he would go away and think, sometimes for days. He was famous for walking in Central Park alone, for long stretches, without an agenda, without a companion, without a telephone, which in the 1930s was becoming the new instrument of constant availability. He once said, and this is the kind of thing that only sounds simple until you sit with it, that the most important thing he ever learned in finance was to do nothing when he did not know what to do. Not to appear to do nothing, not to pretend, to actually, genuinely, completely stop. That sounds almost insultingly obvious. Of course you should wait when you do not have enough information. But watch what happens in practice, in your own life, the next time you face a decision with incomplete information and the silence of indecision begins to press against you. Watch how fast you feel the need to act, to say something, to do something, anything, just to end the discomfort of not knowing. That impulse, that specific and very human impulse, is the crack in the wall that every manipulator, every salesman, every negotiator, every system designed to extract your money and your time has learned to pour themselves through. Baruch understood that impulse in other people before he understood how to silence it in himself. He watched men on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange lose fortunes not because they lacked information, but because they could not tolerate the quiet of uncertainty. They needed to be doing something. They needed to feel like participants, the noise of the floor, the shouting, the numbers changing, the sense of frantic momentum. That noise was not incidental to the exchange. That noise was the product. The noise was what made otherwise rational men act irrationally. And Baruch, who had trained himself to carry a kind of internal silence around him like a coat, could walk through that noise and see it for what it was, theater. Expensive, consequential theater designed to make you forget that you have a choice about whether to participate. Now move the clock forward to the 1950s. The war is over, the soldiers are home, and America has decided, with a kind of collective, almost a desperate enthusiasm, to buy things, to consume, to acquire. The economy needs it. The factories that build tanks need something else to build. The factories that build military uniforms need civilians to want new clothes every season. And so begins the golden age of advertising, which is also, if you look at it from a certain angle, the golden age of manufactured noise. a man named Edward Bernays, had already laid the intellectual groundwork for what was about to happen. Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew, which is the kind of biographical detail that should make you immediately suspicious and deeply curious in equal measure. He had spent the 1920s and 1930s figuring out how to apply his uncle's ideas about the unconscious mind not to therapy, but to commerce. He did not call it manipulation. He called it public relations. He once engineered a campaign to get American women to smoke cigarettes in public, which at the time was considered scandalous for a woman to do. He hired a group of debutantes to march in the 1929 Easter Parade in New York, cigarettes lit, calling them torches of freedom. It worked. Cigarette sales to women climbed. Not because women needed cigarettes, but because Bernays had tied the act of smoking to something women genuinely and legitimately wanted, which was equality and independence. He found a crack in the silence of an unmet desire and filled it with a product. By the 1950s, the techniques Bernays had pioneered were being applied at industrial scale. Television entered the living room and changed everything. Before television, the home had been a place where, by default, there were stretches of quiet. After dinner, before bed, Sunday afternoons. The spaces between activities where a person might sit with their own thoughts and discover what they actually wanted, actually valued, actually believed. Television did not just fill those spaces. It colonized them. It made silence feel like something had gone wrong, like something was broken. The set should be on. The set is always on. And on the set, a steady, beautifully produced, emotionally calibrated stream of messages about who you should be, what your kitchen should look like, what your husband's shirts should smell like, what your children deserved, what you owed to yourself. The economist John Kenneth Galbraith watched this happen and wrote about it in 1958 in a book called The Affluent Society. And what he described was a machine that did not respond to human desire, but created it. The machine would decide what it was efficient to produce and then invest enormous resources in making you believe you had always wanted that thing. You did not come to the store with a need. The need was delivered to your living room, dressed up as entertainment, handed to you by a smiling face you recognized and trusted, and by the time you walked into the store, the want felt completely organic, completely your own. You had no idea it had been installed. That installation process, that quiet colonization of your interior life by external commercial interests, is still happening. It never stopped. It only got faster, more precise, more personalized. The television did not know your name. Your phone knows everything. Here is the mechanics of the trap, laid out as plainly as possible, because once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. And that is exactly where the power begins to shift. Every platform you use for free is not actually free. You are the product. Your attention is the commodity being sold. But it goes deeper than that familiar phrase, which has become so common it has lost its ability to shock. It is not just your attention being sold. It is your restlessness, your fear of missing out, your anxiety about being left behind, about not knowing what everyone else seems to know, about being the only one who did not see the thing, hear the thing, share the thing. That anxiety is not a side effect of the platforms. That anxiety is the platform. It is the engine. Without it, the whole machine stops. Think about how these systems are built. The notification is not designed to inform you. It is designed to interrupt you. There is a difference. Information can wait. An interruption cannot, almost by definition. The red badge on the app icon is red because red signals urgency in the human nervous system. It signals danger. It says something needs your attention right now before something bad happens. Your brain, which evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in an environment where a red signal in your peripheral vision usually meant something trying to eat you, cannot fully distinguish between that ancient danger and the news that someone liked your photograph. The urgency feels real. The interruption feels necessary. And so you stop what you are doing. You check. You scroll. And while you are scrolling, your brain, which was perhaps on the edge of a quiet thought, a useful thought, a thought that was genuinely yours, loses the thread. This is not a minor inconvenience. This is the theft of your cognitive sovereignty. That is a complicated phrase for a simple crime. They are stealing your ability to think your own thoughts for long enough to hear what those thoughts are actually telling you. In negotiation, there is a principle so old and so universally understood among professional negotiators that it barely needs to be stated in the rooms where these people work. The first person to speak after a significant offer or demand is made almost always loses, not because of what they say, because of what the silence before they spoke revealed. Silence, in that moment, is pressure. It is a test. It asks, without asking, how much discomfort can you hold before you crack? And the person who can hold more discomfort, who can sit in the quiet with something close to ease while the other person's anxiety climbs, that person controls the negotiation, not because of any technique, because of something closer to character. Warren Buffett, who manages a sum of money so large that the number requires a moment to process, has spent decades projecting an image of a man who does very little. He sits in Omaha. He reads. He thinks. He occasionally makes a phone call. He does not attend every conference. He does not respond to every trend. When the market is in a state of frenzy, when every other voice in finance is talking constantly about what is happening and what to do and what it means, Buffett tends to go quiet. He tends to wait. He has described his strategy in terms so plain they almost sound like he is making fun of you. Be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful. That is the whole philosophy, more or less. And at the center of that philosophy is the radical act of not reacting, of sitting with the noise until the noise exhausts itself, of trusting that silence, the silence of a patient mind, will outlast the loudest panic. That is not a financial strategy. That is a way of living. And it works in finance because it first works in life. Here is the hardest part. The escape. Not because it requires money or connections or special knowledge that only a few people have access to. The hardest part is that the escape requires you to tolerate something that every system around you has spent decades training you to fear. The escape requires you to sit in silence and do nothing and feel okay about it. Start with 10 minutes. This is not a meditation advertisement. This is not a wellness trend. This is a practical, deliberate act of resistance. 10 minutes in which you do not pick up your phone, in which you do not turn on a podcast or a program, in which you sit with the discomfort of your own mind's noise until that noise begins to settle the way silt settles in water when the water stops being disturbed. Because under the silt, there is something clear, and in that clarity, if you stay long enough to reach it, you will begin to hear something that the system desperately does not want you to hear. You will begin to hear what you actually want, not what you have been told to want. What you specifically and privately and stubbornly actually want from the time you have been given on this earth. That knowledge is dangerous, not to you, to the machine. Because a person who knows what they actually want is almost impossible to sell to. A person who can sit in silence and feel no particular urgency to fill it cannot be manipulated by artificial urgency. A person whose interior life is genuinely rich, genuinely populated with their own thoughts and their own questions, does not need the noise. And a person who does not need the noise is a person the noise cannot touch. The wealthy, the genuinely wealthy, the people whose wealth has compounded across generations and across decades have always known this. They build walls, physical walls around their estates, but also temporal walls around their attention. They do not answer every call. They do not attend every meeting. They have learned, or been taught, or stumbled into the understanding that their time and their mental silence are the most valuable things they possess and the things most under assault from the outside world. And they protect those things with a fierceness that can look from the outside like arrogance or coldness or disconnection. It is none of those things. It is a recognition of value. Your attention is worth more than anything you could buy with it. The moment you treat it that way, the moment you stop handing it out freely to anything that flashes red and makes a sound, is the moment the balance of power begins to shift. The world is not going to get quieter. The machine is not going to slow down and apologize and agree to give you space. The notifications will not stop arriving. The feeds will not stop refreshing. The urgency will not stop being manufactured and delivered and dressed up to look like your own anxiety. The noise will increase. It will find new frequencies. It will get into devices you have not bought yet, into spaces you have not entered yet, into the seams of your day where quiet still occasionally lives. But here is what the noise cannot do. The noise cannot follow you into genuine stillness. Not if you protect that stillness. Not if you treat it as the strategic asset it actually is. Every hour of uninterrupted thought you claim back is an hour the machine does not get. Every decision you make from a place of genuine quiet, from a place where you have actually heard yourself think it through, is a decision that belongs to you rather than to whoever last captured your attention. Every time you sit with discomfort instead of reaching for distraction, you are practicing the one skill that cannot be outsourced, cannot be automated, and cannot be purchased at any price. Silence is not the absence of power. It is where power goes when it is tired of performing. It is where strategy lives before it becomes action. It is where the people who built the things you admire, who made the moves you wish you had made, who saw the thing coming before the noise made it obvious, it is where all of those people went when the world was not watching. The world is screaming, "Let it. You have somewhere better to be."